Okay, so I think we are good to go. Good afternoon, Glenn, and I am glad to welcome you here today to God Life. And we have got a very interesting, very relevant conversation, I think, to talk about today.
Yeah, we do. Sadly, but we do.
I do want to say before we get started, as we're going through, if anyone has questions, they can post them on the page and we will try to answer them. But we're going to be covering several different topics today. But first of all, how about if I open us up in prayer?
Sounds good.
Lord, thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion today and think about what's going on that the whole world is going through right now during this pandemic. And what does that mean for us in our faith, in our relationship with Christ? And also practically, what does that mean in terms of living out that faith in a time such as this? God, thank you for Glenn, Dr. Wood, agreeing to come and speak with us today and share his perspective and some of the things that he has experienced. Lord, I pray that you will bless this time and will bless the people watching and listening today on God Life. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, first of all, I would like to introduce our guest today. That is Dr. Glenn Wood. Glenn has been a doctor in pediatrics for 35 years, and he's actually run several offices which saw more than 100,000 kids a year in medicine, dental, and behavioral health. The other interesting thing, and one of the reasons I really wanted him to come on today, is that he's an epidemiologist. So he has a unique perspective being a Christian and a doctor, but also a specialist in epidemiology. And I'm hoping that we can just have a great conversation and think about what some of the things that people are dealing with. And I just want to welcome you, Glenn. I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thanks. It's a pleasure, although it's really not a pleasure. It's obviously a sad time with a lot of challenges for a lot of people all over the world. I don't know if you saw today that actually in the United States, 100,000 people have now died. And of course, there are deaths all over the world, but it just shows how significant. And for a disease that 6 months ago we didn't even know about, it's pretty
It,
amazing.
It really is amazing. And as you said, all over the world, people are experiencing this. And of course, there are different rates. Different countries are seeing spikes at different levels. Some countries are being affected very severely. Some are coming out of it now. Some are really just getting started and starting to see some of the changes. And of course, the other thing that certainly our God Life Facebook followers are experiencing is there are very different um, governmental communications, different processes, different things that they're hearing and seeing and experiencing, just depending on the country and depending on their culture and their government. Regardless, the good news is, of course, is that God is over all and He is in control, and so we know we can trust Him. But I really am glad that you were able to come and talk to us today, because we are getting so many questions, and I'm sure this happens every time that something like this. It's very unique to us, but it's not unique in the world. It's happened multiple times in the world over however many hundreds of years. But one big question ends up being, where is God in this? What does this mean from a faith perspective? And so I hope to be able to explore a little bit about both of those things. But I would like to ask, the people that are watching and listening, wondering how your family is handling all that's going on with COVID-19 and the pandemic, and would love to see you respond in the posting. So just let us know how you're doing and what's going on with you. And then also, Glenn, I'd like to know how your family is doing. It's been a while since I've been able to see you face to face, but I would love to know how you're doing during all of this.
Well, we're pretty fortunate because no children in the home. It's been a very challenging time for a lot of people who are used to their kids being in school. Our kids are all out, and so it's just my wife Sonia and me at home. It's a lot easier for me to stay at home because I'm more of the introvert who studies and whatnot. She's more of the extrovert, and even yesterday she kind of went a little, just suddenly went crazy and said, "I've got to get out of the house." She took her mask, she washed her hands carefully, and so on. But so personalities certainly enter into this. And, each family, each individual has to sort of gauge their own risk. This thing is not going to go away anytime soon. It's going to be eventually probably all over the world. And so certain people are at higher risk. And because I'm 65 and I have fairly significant asthma, I'm being a bit more careful than, say, if I were 35 and perfectly healthy. So we're doing okay. We'll be happy when things get better, particularly when the risks go down.
I absolutely. And I know that it is depending on, everyone is at some risk, but certainly some more than others. But I would like to put this into a little bit larger perspective because obviously the pandemic is not the only time, we face health crisis. And
Sure.
sometimes people really want to know, why would God allow something like this virus? Why would, or sickness in general, cancer, all kinds of things, people really begin to question, if God loves us, why would he allow something like this?
Yeah, well, and it's an age-old question that's been around for millennia. So I'll give a quick answer, but first of all, I believe God, who so loved us that He sent His Son to suffer and die for us, really loves all of us and wants the best for us. So He wasn't just sitting around thinking, let's make the humans miserable. But the world is broken because of sin, and so there's a lot of things that happen that put us in danger. And of course, we all eventually die. We're only given a certain amount of time, maybe as high as 100 or a little over 100 years, and so we all have to, as you said, have to face health crises. But I also see it as a great opportunity to love other people, to also pray for them, to tell them that you're praying for them. And frankly, something like this shows us that our dependency on things like our financial health or medicine or science is limited. There are always things that are risky out there in the world that science and having a good bank account don't fix.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because one of the questions that just came in was around that. When you have no, when you don't have money, you don't have a business, you may not even have a church to depend on. So that goes right back to what you're saying in terms of depending on God during these times, whether it is sickness or financial or other areas. So I really appreciate the question. I would love to know, from your own experience, as a doctor, one of the challenges I think some people go through is reconciling faith and science, medicine and science, and that might be a challenge. So I'm curious about your personal experience as a doctor and where your faith kind of fits into that.
Well, I was a Christian when I was going to medical school and actually learning about the wonder, we're fearfully and wonderfully made, as the psalm said, the wonder of the human body and how intricate and precise it is, how it all fits together actually increased my faith. Plus, just the joy of being able to interact with people, to help people. It's been a faith builder for me. Historically, most scientists have actually believed in God, and part of it is because of how incredible the human body is, how incredible nature is, how things work together. Although, again, we see that the world has fallen and that there's still some negative things, including diseases out there as well.
I would think too, as a doctor and an epidemiologist, one of the joys of what you do is all of these mysteries that are out there with the human body, being able to discover and use tools that God provides through science,
Yeah.
to solve some of those mysteries and make those connections, to be able to help and to help people survive, but also find answers to diseases, and whether it's a cure or a treatment. I would just think that would be very exciting.
Well, it is, and you think about it. 100 years ago, or certainly 200 years ago, this would have stayed a very localized infection and maybe spread over years and decades rather than literally in a matter of days. So our technology, the fact that we fly all over the world, we have boats coming from all over the world that can also bring in different diseases. Those things have cost us, but then on the other hand, obviously there's lots of benefits, and God has given us a mind so we can develop drugs and vaccines and ventilators and things to treat this. And I think that's out of his love for us as well.
Absolutely. It does bring up a question around the pandemic, I think, that people have, and there's probably not a great answer to this, but how long might the pandemic last? And in the meantime, what kinds of things? I know you mentioned the asthma, so you're not going out, but um, everything we're seeing seems to be in stages on what you would do. But any thoughts on how long this might last?
Well, of course, pandemic means it's going on all over the world. And so I'll bring it back a little bit and say COVID-19 is probably here to stay. In my lifetime, I've seen probably about 5 new diseases that uh, have gone all over the world, including HIV or AIDS, Legionnaire disease, toxic shock syndrome, and some others. So those things don't typically go away. It's once they're sort of out of the bottle, it's very hard to put them back in. So the question is going to be more of how serious is it? Uh, we're weekly learning more and more. We're learning how to better care for people, even without medicines, even positioning and doing different things in the hospital that can help. We have an antiviral that may be helpful, and others hopefully are on the way, as well as vaccines. Once those things come into place, then it will be an established disease, probably much like the flu is, but hopefully not nearly so devastating. And of course, there's also remote areas of the world that it may take a little while for it to reach there. It may take months or even a year or a couple of years if you live in a very, very remote area. But I'm afraid it's here to stay.
So then the key really will be treatment and vaccine, and hopefully getting that, so those areas that maybe haven't peaked yet, by the time they get it, if there are effective treatments, that will be great for them. And then as it reappears here seasonally or whatever happens, we'll have more treatments to be able to deal with it.
Right, and that's one of the reasons. Well, there's a couple of reasons that, at least in Europe and the United States, where the United States is really the center in terms of numbers, although places like Brazil and other places are certainly going up faster and faster. But one of the reasons that they, if you can ask the question, well, if we're all going to get it, why don't we just all go and have a party and get
Right.
it together?
Kind of
But
like what they used to do with measles and mumps and with
right,
kids,
right.
right? Just get everybody in the neighborhood infected.
One of the reasons to stay at home is that we're still learning about this. And my preference would be to get this or get exposed to this after I've had an effective vaccine, or when we have multiple treatments available, or we know a whole lot more about it. I was, give you an example, I was concerned about my asthma. I'm still a little bit concerned, but that doesn't seem to be nearly the concern that we thought it was 3 months ago. Whereas things like diabetes and heart disease, chronic lung disease continue to be major concerns for people. So we also don't want to overwhelm the medical system. We saw that especially in Italy. We saw that to a certain degree, a lesser degree in New York City. But if it's just chaotic in the hospitals, if your doctors and nurses are exhausted, if you're running out of ventilators when you need them, then the potential mortality goes up by about 10 times. So we'd really rather spread it out, and hopefully we'll have a much better idea about how to take care of people and what kind of medicines and treatments to use.
Right. Wow, there's so many things we could focus on. I can't believe it's already been 15 minutes that we've been talking. I would like to ask one more question, but before we go, and perhaps we can do this again and explore further. There are so many
Sure.
things people want to know. But I guess one particular question would be, how do we as Christians, how should we be reacting during this time? How can we be a light to others who may be struggling or are facing anxiety, facing financial issues, isolation, loneliness? What can we as Christians do to help others?
Well, it's a sad time, but it's also a time of opportunity to really show the love of Christ for other people. Many of us are stuck at home, but those of us who have obviously technology as we're using now, we can call people, we can FaceTime with them, we can really be encouragers. Obviously, we can pray both for that the epidemic is not as bad as maybe people are concerned about, but also pray for protection for our families and friends. And think about the doctors or other people who are working in grocery stores or delivery people who really keep our economy and our lives going. And those people need to be encouraged as well. So it's a great time to reach out to them and tell them thanks and that you really appreciate what they're doing.
Well, and I certainly would encourage that. And as we think about what's happening globally, we just had a note someone posted about asking for prayer for South Africa as they begin to reach their peak. And I
Mhm.
think we will see that over the next few months as different countries hit the different levels. So we will definitely be praying for all of our followers on Facebook and all the people that through the whole world that are dealing with this pandemic, and but knowing that we can depend on Christ for everything and continuing to pray for each other. Well,
Yeah.
Dr. Wood, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you do have other questions, go ahead and post those. We may be able to respond to those later. But thanks again and hope to see you soon. God bless you.